So apparently, Andy Warski is the first person from the skeptic community to jump on the race realism bandwagon as a means to defend himself from being bundled in as a traitor to the anti-SJW cause. He's made a big show of cannibalizing members of his own community in the last week or so, maybe a little more, since YouTube turned into why Jeff and Kraut are worse than Nazis platform, which obviously I don't agree with. I think that the work that Jeff Holiday and various other YouTubers who were in the Kraut server that has created so much controversy, we're doing a very important work. There is a myth that the Kraut server was a doxing server. That meme is being perpetuated by Andy Warski. You know, Warski is one of these people that it's hard for me to understand what he is, because he's very stupid. He's very inarticulate. He's not well studied on any subjects. Most of his videos are just a series of bad improv jokes with this really shticky sidekick sitting next to him and laughing obnoxiously at his jokes. He's not a substance guy. He was like Chris Raygun. He was supposed to be a comedian. He was supposed to be the guy that mined SJW cringe for his viewers and basically pointed and laughed at marginalized people and how butthurt they were over the injustices they face in everyday society. Now, Andy Warski, for whatever reason, and you know, I've had my suspicions about Warski for a while, because the people he criticizes have often had black faces. Everybody does social justice, and on that side, all the anti-SJWs do content bitching about, you know, feminists, but Warski's content always had a racial tinge to it. He was always really hurt about Black Lives Matter. He was always really angry about white victimhood, you know, which it's hard to delineate which skeptics are trafficked the most in white grievance. But Andy Warski is certainly the shiniest turd when it comes to the whole being super concerned about what happens to white victims. And I used to think it was a cynical thing. I used to think it was just for Patreon bucks, and maybe it still is. You know, I can't usually tell the difference between a fool and a fraud, because that line, I guess, is so that line is so thin in reactionary politics. But anyway, after the alt-right got their feelings hurt over the idea that Kraut and Jeff were involved in a server that was about counter-arguing and counteracting the alt-right, Andy Warski got up in his soapbox and started super condemning the server, and using a very careful deflection tactic, which is to say that his problem is not that they were attacking the alt-right, but rather the tactics which they were using to attack the alt-right. And I've mentioned here on this channel that you can use pretty much any tactics to undermine the alt-right and to you know, bash them personally, you know, making the people in their community aware that there's a fucking Nazi amongst them. You know, when people talk to me about, you know, what is, you know, oh, do you endorse doxing and stuff like that? Well, there's different forms of doxing. There are righteous forms of doxing. So what's the kind of doxing that I don't endorse? I don't endorse doxing that, you know, gets people, you know, wrongly accused, and I don't know. It's difficult to defend forms of doxing. But, you know, to me, don't you want to know if your kid's school teacher is a Nazi? Don't you want to know if, you know, your local police officer is a closet pedophile? I mean, this whole, like, guarantee of anonymity thing sort of dissipates when, you know, you shouldn't dox somebody who's bitching about how much they hate social justice in comic books. Like, that's a harmless person, you know. But if you have somebody who is involved in a terrorist organization, in a movement for political violence like the alt-right, if you have somebody who is involved in a movement that is very, very triangulated with child exploitation, like the pedophile acceptance movement, then I think you have a moral obligation to make people in that person's community know who they're dealing with. I mean, just think about it in the most rudimentary sense. Should someone like Mike Enoch, who got doxed, the podcaster on the Right Stuff, which is an alt-right Nazi talk radio show, like an alt-right version of the Howard Stern show, which I guess is ironic. Should he have been doxed? Yes, because he was working as a software engineer, and God forbid the guy was working in some kind of managerial capacity, and you want to get a job at Mike Enoch's company, and you don't know that he's a fucking Nazi, and you're Jewish, or you're black, or you're Hispanic, and you don't know that you're not getting a fair shake because Mike Enoch doesn't think, he subspeciates you and doesn't think that you are a human being. So yes, it's important to expose someone like that, even if it's at the expense of them losing their job, their house. I know there were some people, even though he wasn't doxxed, Amos Yee uses his real name publicly, I believe, and Amos Yee lost his house, his apartment that he was renting, because the landlord found out that he was an advocate for pedophilia and for abolishing age of consent laws. This is relevant shit. And like I said, if someone's on the internet talking about how much they don't like Rihanna or something banal like that, then they should be entitled to anonymity. Even you know, generic trolls should be able to be rude on the internet. I'm not saying that people should be in danger of doxing for that kind of stuff. But even the stuff that supposedly Jeff Holiday looked into the personal effects of this YouTuber named Coach Red Pill. The guy's a public figure. He is a public figure with a giant platform, and it turns out that he had some dubious background as a scammer, as a confederate of Richard Spencer. Like, this shit is not negligible. You know what I mean? When they found out that Hannibal the Victor had been on some pedophilia conviction shit, who was ostensibly on the social justice side, the right wing didn't have a problem doxing that guy, and I don't blame them. You should expose someone like that who's trying to exist in your community. They shouldn't be left to operate under the shade of internet anonymity. But, you know, coming back to Warski went from being like the cool, tolerant, liberal bro. I mean, he was always stupid, but he's gone into like full-blown race is real. You know, Andy Warski is a fascinating example of how deeply related egocentrism is to the alt-right. Egocentrism takes failures like, excuse me, the alt-right appeals to your sense of vanity. So if you've been marginalized, isolated, this is all cult shit, right? You take the isolated person who has a low opinion of themselves, or has lived something of a mediocre existence, a washout academic like Jordan Peterson, or JF Garyepi, or whatever his fucking name is. I can't pronounce French things. You take this mediocre or substandard individual, and exalt their intelligence for someone like Mouthy Buddha too. You insult that you exalt their intelligence for agreeing with your stupid crap, and oh, you're so smart and you're so red-pilled, and the deeper that they mire themselves in ignorance, the more you sort of tell them the opposite of, like, you're being liberated as you become a slave. It's like a minimum wage guy being a libertarian, you know what I mean? And then these billionaires, oh, you're one of the good ones, you're really smart, or one of these black Republicans like Ben Carson, one of these trans people like Blair White, or formerly Theron Meyer, who are militantly transphobic of non-binary people. You know, the haters look at those people and go, this one is special, this one gets it, this one knows what's going on. And then, of course, the shallow individual, the egocentric individual, eats that up and becomes dependent on this hollow affirmation, and they'll do anything to hold on to it. Warski has proven that he is so afraid of going back to being an unknown, incompetent, mediocre internet comedian that he's willing to follow the anti-SJW e-celeb brand into race realism, into eugenics, into platforming the science that perpetuated American chattel slavery, into platforming the science that enabled the Holocaust. That's how important it is for Andy Warski to be somebody.